I almost didn't come back. Not because I didn't love podcasting, but because I wasn't sure who I was anymore. This past season, between motherhood, healing, loss, and deep internal shifts, asked me to get quiet, to listen. And in that quiet, I found something I didn't expect. I found the version of me who was ready to begin again. If you've ever felt like you were starting over or like your voice was lost in the noise, this episode is for you. Welcome back to the Voicekeeper Podcast. I'm Caroline, spiritual coach, sacred guide, and fellow traveler on this wild, winding path of voice reclamation. Today's episode marks the beginning of a new season for this podcast, and maybe for you too. I realized, it was pointed out to me by a very dear friend, that when I started this new path in my business, I didn't really do a launch. And so this episode is, for me, energetically and also like very symbolically, a relaunch of the podcast. I'm going to have a fun relaunch week. And I'm just so excited that you're here and going on this journey with me. And like that we're taking a moment to celebrate this, because it's important to celebrate the things that we do that are momentous and important. Over the next few episodes, we're going to walk together through what it means to awaken, reclaim, and embody your voice. These are the 3 phases in my Voicekeeper framework. And this isn't just in business. This is in your body, your rhythm, your truth. So if you're coming to me as a business owner, somebody who I maybe worked with in the podcasting space, I think you will find a lot of truth in this. And then if you're somebody who is not in the business space, this is going to be for you as well. But before we begin, I want you to take a deep breath in and release. If you like, you can place your hand on your heart or your belly, and I want you to feel the weight of this moment, not as pressure, but as permission. Permission to begin again. Because new beginnings are happening all the time, and that's okay. So let's talk about new beginnings. New beginnings aren't always clean. They're often uncomfortable, unclear. They can even be really lonely, but they're also sacred. I really feel that new beginnings mark the moment we choose ourselves, and not because it's easy. They're hardly ever easy, right? But because we are ready. For me, this new beginning really came from this nudge that I have been feeling for a really long time. It's a nudge that has been about how I interact with people, how I help people. And it's also very much about this journey that I have been on as well. Because over the years, many, many years, and I kind of talked about this in some previous episodes, but there has been this recurring theme in my life of losing oneself, finding oneself, reclaiming oneself, finding your voice, standing in your power, finding your confidence, discovering who you really are. I feel like every time something has happened in my life, that has been like the journey I've been taken on. And this year, it was like the universe like hit me in the face with it. It was like, you need to do something with this. The last few clients that I've worked with, I've really realized that the work that I was doing was so much more than podcasting. It really was about visibility. It really was about finding your voice, finding your confidence, believing that you have something worth speaking about. And what's interesting is the more that I talk to people in business, outside of business, wherever, the more I realize that this is a theme that comes up a lot, especially for women. And it just felt like something that I was being super pulled to talk about. You know, I am someone who has gone through deconstructing old beliefs, figuring out where my spirituality is in this world, how I want to raise my children in that, my 3 beautiful daughters. I want them to be strong, independent women, and what that means as well. And there's a lot of, pieces of this journey that also involved, me being completely okay with who I am. And that has been so incredibly difficult. I have been told many times in my life that who I am is not okay in various places, in various industries, including, the podcast industry, including the ballet industry, including the professional industry. I worked for a publishing company for a while when I first got out of college, and they made me feel so terrible about myself every second of every day that I worked there. And then I've worked in places where I worked with really amazing women who encouraged me and who wanted me to step into my power. I've been in industries where I felt like I couldn't really be fully me, or I didn't know how to, because I had never been allowed to be me before. And it definitely is really interesting because you become 40. They say that something happens to you when you become 40. I mean, I don't know who they are, and I don't know if they actually say that. But I think I had in my brain that when I turned 40, something magical was going to happen to me. And it kind of did. Like, I definitely turned 40 and was like, man, what have I been waiting for? To live fully as me, to step fully into who I am. And it's been such an incredible journey over the last couple of years, figuring out who that is. Who is Caroline? What does she believe? What does she want to do? At the same time, I was really considering, like, how do I want to spend my time in my professional life? And one of the things that kept popping up for me was like, I want to help women like me. I want to help women like me who are burned out, who are tired, who don't know who they are anymore. And I want to help them figure it out, because in figuring it out, it has brought me such a sense of joy and freedom that I can't even describe. It's so glorious to wake up every morning and just know that, like, I am choosing this, I'm choosing happiness, and I'm loving every second of it. But, none of this would have been possible if I hadn't decided to go on this journey, if I hadn't decided to embrace new beginnings and to also, like, take some of the stuff that I've learned and bring some of it with me, let some of it go. I mean, there's a lot to this journey. And so I wanted to share that with you because I think a lot of times when we think about coaches, we sometimes wonder if they've walked the walk or if they're just talking the talk, right? And I want you to know that I have walked this really hard, windy, and complicated path for many, many years. And it's not something that ends. It's something that continues. And I feel like even in this phase of my journey, this too is a new beginning, right? Okay, so let's talk about beginnings before I just go completely off. I want to give you some things to think about with new beginnings, because maybe you're facing a new beginning in your own life, in your business, or maybe you're looking for a new beginning, right? Like maybe something is ending and you're like, what is next? So I want to talk about beginnings. And I think this is such a great topic, especially with this podcast, kind of starting its own new beginning. New beginnings are not failures. I really want to emphasize this. You are not starting over. You're starting from experience, from wisdom, from truth. One of the things that I have seen that holds back a lot of people from taking leaps is they're so worried that if they end something and start something else, it says to the world, I failed at this, so I have to do this other thing. And like, what if we reframe that from, I didn't fail. I learned everything I needed to learn from that experience, and I am ready to recalibrate to enter a new phase of me. Doesn't that feel and sound so much better? And so I want you to reflect on, like, where have you judged yourself for changing course? Could it be like you moved somewhere and decided it wasn't where you wanted to be, so you had to move again? Or maybe you decided to homeschool your kids and you decided it wasn't from your family, and so you've decided to do that. What are the words? What's the language you used around how you described that moment? Did you call yourself a failure? Well, that didn't work, so I'm going to go do something else. What is the tone that you're taking with yourself? And I think this is a really important question because then it leads into, like, what version of you are you ready to leave behind? A lot of times when we start something new or we step into a new beginning, it's because we want to leave something behind. But if we don't acknowledge it and grow from it, that thing that we're trying to leave behind is going to keep coming back and showing back up. Just today, as I'm recording this, I was sitting down this morning. I was really frustrated with my finances. It's something I struggle with. Money mindset is something I struggle with big time. It's something I'm working on. And it keeps coming up in this new beginning that I'm in with my business and my podcast and all the things. And I said to myself, if you don't take this head on, this is going to follow you into the next version of yourself. So I sat with it this morning, really with a beautiful coffee that I made in my coffee maker, some cards and some reflections. And I really thought about what is holding me back? Why does this keep coming up? And how can I step forward from it, right? How can I learn from this, take from it, but become something more? And it takes a lot of maturity and a lot of humility to sit with yourself and ask those questions. But when you can do that, when you can have that much self-awareness, it impacts everything that you do. Because now, whenever you take a step, you're taking it with intention. So those are two things I want you to reflect on about maybe a new beginning you're in. Where have you judged yourself, and what version of you are you ready to leave behind? So the other thing about new beginnings is that they invite a reconnection with yourself. And I love this part. I love reconnecting with myself. I love connecting with myself. I love learning more about who I am and what's important to me and how that shows up in my life. But I'm going to tell you right now, it is not about doing more. It's about listening deeply. Probably more deeply than you're used to listening to yourself, right? And your next beginning might be quiet. It might be subtle. It might be internal. But that doesn't make it any less powerful. Sometimes beginnings start inside, like a little spark, a little match that's lit inside of yourself, and you can feel it. You're like, man, something is new is beginning. Something is changing. But a lot of times that little spark, we don't listen to it because we're too busy listening to everything around us. We're too busy listening to what our past has told us about ourselves. And we forget that this spark inside is given to us by our own self, right? It comes from within, which means it needs to be listened to. How often do you ignore what you hear inside? And so I want you to think about, what is your body whispering right now? And it can be about anything. It could be about dinner. It could be about, the keyboard you're using. It could be about the amount of time you're spending on your phone. What is your body telling you right now? And then think about what truth from that is ready to rise, even if it's inconvenient. This is one of those self-awareness pieces that's really hard because oftentimes we will tell ourselves hey, you shouldn't do that, or you should do this. You need to go outside of your comfort zone. And you might say to yourself, the heart says that, and then your brain goes, no, I'm not doing that. That's really hard. I'm not comfortable with that. And so you don't do it. What happens when you don't listen to that little voice? Because it's too hard, it's too inconvenient. And that's what I think about a lot. In my life, I have spent a lot of time ignoring myself. I've spent a lot of time pushing that inner wisdom down, that intuition. And I think about the trouble it's caused or the wrong turns. Now, granted, all of that was learning experience. I wouldn't be who I am with all the things. But I think about a lot. I was a ballet dancer, and I'm going to have to do a whole episode on my journey in the ballet world because it is a story. But there were a lot of moments where my intuition was saying, this is not what you need to be doing. You're in the wrong place. This is the wrong time, whatever. And I kept pushing it down for all kinds of reasons. And it ended up not ending so well. Now, would it have ended differently? I don't know. But what I learned from that was that I had the power to change my circumstance. And I didn't because I was too afraid. It was going to be too hard. I was very stubborn about the situation I was in. And that's just a big example, but this can pop up with a lot of things. I think about homeschooling with my kids. This week I've been looking at curriculum because I'm planning homeschooling. And I've been having a really hard time finding a literature program that I love because I have very specific ideas about the literature I want them to study. I want them to study the greats, like Great Expectations, Romeo and Juliet, To Kill a Mockingbird. So I was looking at all these really expensive programs. Like I'm talking like $250 for a program. And I was just like, man, this is lackluster. This isn't what I want. And this little voice kept telling me, like, why are you seeking out something that you can build yourself? And I was like, ugh, I don't want to build it myself. That feels really hard. I did that last year and I don't want to do it again. And when I finally stopped arguing with myself and was like, fine, I'm going to build it myself, I did very quickly. It didn't take much time at all because I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew exactly what I wanted it to look like. And I'm really excited. The literature programs I have developed for my kids this year are going to be so fun. And I'm really excited about the books. So that's another little example. That voice is popping up all the time. If you can learn to listen to it, friends, let me tell you. So another thing about new beginnings that I love is that it makes space for your voice. And this goes back to that inner voice. This season of the podcast is all about reconnecting to your voice, not just the one that you use to speak, but the one that guides you. This is what I was just talking about. What is inside, but specifically, I want you to think about how this relates to your voice, whether it's like the words you speak, how you're showing up in the world, things maybe you want to talk about, but you don't talk about, how you talk about the work you do, how you talk about your kids, how you talk about your family. Think about it. What part of your voice feels quiet right now? And what would it sound like to let her speak? These two questions right here, I have been mulling over for like the last year. I'm like getting a little bit emotional thinking about it. I've probably been mulling over it longer than that. Actually, it's been much longer than that. And these questions were hard for me to answer because I very much felt like I wanted to talk about certain things, but I didn't feel like it was my place. And so what I started to think about was, what would it sound like to let her speak? What would it look like? Maybe this is a really great exercise for you. If you feel like there's a part of you that is clenched, like can't come out, like what would it look like if that part of you came out? What would it feel like? What would it sound like? What would your life look like if you allowed that part of you to speak? And again, this doesn't have to be like, I'm stepping up on a soapbox. This can be, I'm not happy in my job. I want to do something different. This could be, I'm not happy with the dynamic in our home. I think we need to learn to love each other better. This could be, I have let myself go in these last few years and I don't remember who I am, and I want to take the time and the energy to rediscover her. All is sacred, all is valid. All is sacred, all is valid. For me, this came up in little ways, like posting something on Facebook or, being afraid of what people would think if I wore a certain shirt, right? But that's, those little things are the things that hold us back from being truly who we are. And when you're not being who you truly are, you're not free. You're not you. You're not in alignment. And then everything else starts to feel hard, right? Because you're not living your life to the fullest. And so I really want this launch week of the podcast, this relaunch week, to be an invitation to you to step into my world, to see that there is space for you to be exactly who you want to be, and a space for you to find that piece of yourself that maybe has been quieted by life, by the day-to-day grind of just living. And there is a way to live fully in alignment with yourself and your voice, and to still have everything around you that you have or want or need. It really is possible. Your voice is sacred. And if you're in a season of beginning again or even longing to, this podcast will be a gentle companion for your journey. And I'm really excited because with the relaunch of the podcast, there's also been an incredible refinement of my offerings on my end. And I have some new things coming. One is the Voicekeeper Circle, which will be launching very soon. I'm so excited. You can join the waitlist on my website. And then, be sure to join my email list as well, because I'm now doing a newsletter twice a week. And I'm also doing 2 free events twice a month. Did I say newsletter twice a week? I meant twice a month. And then I'm also doing free events twice a month that coincide with the moon cycles. They're completely free. There's no replay. But all of this is on my website. So I really invite you, like if any of this is resonating with you and you're like, oh, I need to be a part of this, it's all on my website. Please go check it out. So I just want to end with a little closing, because I love in my episodes to have a grounding moment and a closing moment. And I just want to tell you, you don't need permission to begin again. You don't. You just need your voice and a little courage to follow it. I'm so glad you're here, and we are going to find that courage together.